So I was 19 years old, and Greg, Carl, and I had an unlimited Eurail pass. Our only set plan was flying into London and then out of Paris 2.5 months later. No itinerary in between that, and we barely stayed anywhere for more than 2 nights because we wanted to see everything. We went to beaches and museums and bars and nightclubs. We went bungee jumping in Switzerland. At the time was the second highest bungee jump place in the world. It was a gondola, like a ski lift, that would lift you halfway up a cliff, and then you would jump out of it. There was a 100-meter jump and a 180-meter jump. We did the 180-meter jump. I mean, come on. The summer after, the next year, they put the 180-meter bungee cord on a guy doing the 100-meter jump. So if you're any good at math, you can deduce that that company no longer exists. And that guy who jumped out with the extra long cord is not up here tonight telling a story about luck. But this isn't about bungee jumping or death or anything like that. This is Europe, back to Europe. After 4 weeks, Greg, Carl, and I had never been more than like 5 feet away from each other, and we realized that we wanted to kill each other. Again, I promise this is not about death. So we decided to split up. Now, this could cause me a problem later on. So this was 1998. There were no cell phones. No one had cell phones at that time. I barely had an email address. I had just learned about Hotmail. And it was July 12th. We were in Athens, Greece, and we decided we wanted 10 days apart from each other. So we said this: let's meet on July 22nd, Rome, train station, track 5 at noon. That was it. So the next morning, I got on a 6-hour ferry ride to the island of Mykonos. Great. And as soon as I got on the boat, I recognized a group of girls sitting at a table playing cards. And I had seen these girls the week before at a hostel we had stayed in called the Pink Palace. It's not what you think it is, or whatever it is that you think it is. Sick bugs. But I'd never spoken to these girls at the Pink Palace. I had just seen them, but I recognize it because you don't forget a group of attractive, outgoing Australian girls traveling together, even if you never had the balls to go talk to them because you were a late bloomer and were still a virgin and were still worried that everyone would find out you were still a virgin, and then you would always be a virgin because everyone would think you were a dork. But the thing is, I recognize them, and that's the point. Instead of going up to them and introducing myself and saying, like, hey, I recognize you from the Pink Palace, I just conveniently placed myself near them in the hopes that eventually I would be eased into their conversation. This was no meet cute. I figured that 6 hours in their proximity would eventually lead to some sort of interaction, which it did. And I don't remember exactly how it happened. I'm pretty sure they asked me if I wanted to play cards with them. And lucky for me, I did want to play cards with them. There were 7 Australian girls and traveling together, and at some point in their travels, they joined forces with a Canadian guy. And yes, he did have a Canadian flag maple leaf patch on his backpack. They all do. It's not a stereotype, it's a fact. His name was also Scott. So I became known affectionately by the Australians as Scotty 2. By the end of the 6 hours, it was pretty clear that I was now part of the group. Greg and Carl, fuck those guys. When we arrived in Mykonos, it was determined we would all hang out together. And instead of staying in some shitty hostel, let's just rent a big house with an ocean view and all stay there for a week. Okay. The next week was a bit of a blur of awesomeness. If you don't know much about Mykonos, which some people over here clearly did, it's this beautiful, beautiful Greek island with these gorgeous beaches and you've seen it in pictures. All the buildings are white and Greeky and have like ocean views with sunsets and everything. It's just gorgeous, and it's also a ridiculously expensive party scene. And I should tell you that Greg, Carl, and I were on a very tight budget. The summer before that, I had spent all summer saving money working at Ben & Jerry's. And I use working loosely because mostly what we did was smoke pot in the walk-in freezer and that easy. And do whippets with the nitrous cartridges. Not as easy. And eat Cherry Garcia all night. So barely working. So basically what Greg, Carl, and I had been doing for the first 4 weeks before we wanted to kill each other was we carried around a jar of Nutella, and every morning, Nutella, great, who knew? Every morning we would buy a fresh baguette. You can buy them anywhere in Europe, they're pretty cheap. And we would dip that baguette in the Nutella, and that would be our breakfast and our lunch. And occasionally, on the rare occasion, it would be our dinner a few times a week. So it became clear really quickly that the Australian girls were not on a budget. They were rich. And though I put up a fight, I promised I put up a fight, they demanded on paying for everything. So here I was on this beautiful, beautiful Greek island for a week with 7 hot Australian girls just buying me shit. Okay. I recently learned that the Greek god of luck is Tyche. So at this point in my life, Tyche was so much more worthy of my prayers than whatever god I had been praying to 6 years earlier at my bar mitzvah. So, Baruch Atah Tyche. But as any good Jew will tell you, all good things must come to an end. July 22nd, Rome, train station, track 5, noon, was right around the corner. And this was no simple journey. To get from Mykonos to Rome, it was 2.5 days. I wasn't going to fly. I couldn't fly. I didn't unless the Australians were going to pay for it. So it involved a ferry from Mykonos back to mainland Greece, then a train to northern Greece, then another overnight ferry to southern Italy, and then another train to Rome. 2.5 days. So to get there by the 22nd on noon, my last chance was to get on a ferry out of Mykonos. I had to get on this ferry on the midnight on July 19th in order to get there by the 22nd. And I absolutely had to get on this ferry, otherwise Greg and Carl would never ever find me, and without cell phones, the world would implode. So on July 19th, my final day in Mykonos, all I heard from everyone was, "No, Scotty 2, you can't go. You can't leave us. We just threw some shrimp on the barbie. Kangaroos, Scotty 2. And this was killing me. You know, I didn't want to leave. So we had this nice dinner. We drank a bunch of wine. And by 9 p.m., I found myself in the warm Mediterranean summer sea, making out with a beautiful Australian girl named Felicity. Stars, the warm water, the lights of Mykonos, those full Australian lips and tongue. We swam and kissed and swam and kissed and kissed and kissed. To be 19 again. When I'm on my deathbed, I know there will be a handful of moments that I will never forget, that I will cherish, that I will feel lucky to have experienced, and this will be one of them, even if I still left Mykonos a virgin. When it was time to head to the port to get on the midnight ferry, I thought long and hard, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't leave Mykonos. I couldn't leave Felicity. At least not tonight. I just wasn't strong enough. So I said, fuck it. I'm not getting on that fucking ferry. When I got back to the house to figure out what my options were, I realized that, I learned that if I got on a fucking ferry tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., I could get to Rome by 5 p.m. on the 22nd, only 5 hours late. So, where were we? Great. With no way to communicate with Greg and Carl, I think that's what their names were, I knew there would be a problem if I didn't show up. So I pulled out my calling card and I went to the nearest payphone, if you guys remember those things, they were everywhere. And I called Mom back in the States. So I said, so Mom, here's the deal. I need you to call Greg's mom and Carl's mom and tell them they're probably going to get a call in about 2.5-ish days wondering where the hell I am. Tell them to tell them I'll be there at 5. And there was this really long silence, probably enhanced by the 1998 signal delay from Greece to North Carolina. And then my mom just said, "What?" I had failed to tell her that we had split up. And I tried to just get her to pass along the message without having to explain everything, but she just wasn't having it. She was my mom, and she deserved to know. And she was a cool mom at that. A few weeks earlier when I called her from Amsterdam and explained to her what it was like there, and what you could smoke, and what you could buy in stores, and what you could do, and who you could do, she just said, "I don't think I want you doing the mushrooms." So I explained everything to her, and I hoped for the best. That night, I partied with the 7 Australians, and Scotty won, all night. In the morning, I said goodbye, and Felicity and Scotty One walked me to the port. I could have done without Scotty One tagging along for this walk, but I think he was just oblivious to the sweet lip-loving that Felicity and I had the night before, and he was just trying to be nice. So I gave Scotty One a hug, Felicity gave me one last kiss, and I got on the fucking ferry. The journey from Mykonos to Rome is a long but beautiful one. I had a lot of time staring at the sunsets and the mountains and the ocean and the water and the beaches. A lot of time to think about Mykonos, and a lot of time to wonder whether my mom would pull through on her assignment. Would Carl and Greg be there, or would the world implode? When I got to Rome 55 hours later, the train I was on pulled right into track 5, and there were Greg and Carl waiting for me. I recently called Greg and asked him what he remembered from the Europe trip. And he said what he remembered most was when he and Carl showed up at the train station in Rome at noon, and I wasn't there. Greg and Carl are still great friends of mine. I never spoke to or saw Felicity again. I've tried to find her, but without a last name, forget about it. There are way too many Felicities from Australia on Facebook. And I'm sure she's spent countless hours looking for me, and I'm sure she's had very similar difficulties finding me on Facebook. Scotty 2 from America. But who knows, maybe one day she'll get lucky. Or maybe she's dead.